Joe Wright, you directed Darkest Hour, which is about Winston Churchill becoming prime minister while England is under threat of invasion during World War II. So what made you interested in telling this story?
I was interested in the idea that it was a film about the power of words to change and indeed shape the course of history. So that was the first and primary reason. And then I was interested in the idea of taking Winston Churchill, who's this character that's been lionized over the decades and placed on a plinth and kind of untouchable, and bringing him down from that plinth and examining who he was as an individual at this crucial and pivotal moment in world history.
Yeah, and Churchill has been portrayed many times in the past, including by John Lithgow and Brian Cox in this past year. What were your thoughts about bringing another Churchill story to the screen? Given how much people already know about the character.
I didn't really have any thoughts about it, to be honest with you. I mean, The Crown hadn't happened when I started making this film, and the Churchill film hadn't happened. I didn't know they were happening even. So I wasn't really, and I don't really think about what other people are doing. I just keep my head down and get on with my work.
This film is set during the period of the Dunkirk evacuation, which you actually depicted the beaches of Dunkirk previously in Atonement. What was it like exploring that event from such a different point of view this time around?
Well, it was almost like a continuation of Atonement, in the sense that Atonement was a story told about a specific period of time from many different angles. And this was the same timeline, but just from another angle. It felt like a companion piece to it, really.
And speaking of companion pieces, there's also kind of Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk from earlier this year that also depicts the evacuation. Having both of these films out in the same year, do you think they, in a way, complement each other in a way that adds maybe insight to the whole story?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely piece of synchronicity, and I guess they do, really. So that's been nice.
Now, Gary Oldman has been getting a lot of praise for his performance as Winston Churchill. He doesn't resemble Churchill that much until the makeup goes on. So what was the casting process and the decision made to cast him in that role like?
Well, Gary is, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest actor there is, and I grew up kind of worshipping his performances as a teenager. So the opportunity to work with Gary was probably the greatest honor I've had. He was the first person. Well, he was the first person I kind of thought of. The idea of casting other actors who maybe looked like him, like Churchill, a bit more, wasn't that appealing. I wanted someone who had a kind of intensity, a kind of manic energy. And as we know from Gary's body of work, he's certainly able to deliver intensity. And the essence of the character is always, the most important thing. You can fake the exterior, but you can't really fake the interior.
Now, the makeup effects are an important part of helping Oldman achieve the look of Churchill. How much work went into getting that look just right, for so that it's convincing but not distracting in a way?
Well, we developed the makeup over a period of about 6 months, and there were many iterations of the look. The first one was like way too far, and he just looked like he had this kind of face of plastic. And then we finally, through trial and error, found a kind of sweet spot where he looked enough like Churchill, but still there was access to Gary's performance. And so, it was a long process, but when we got it, we could then forget about it almost. And it never, it never changed the way we shot, or it was just like working with this actor who looked remarkably like Winston Churchill.
Beyond the makeup, of course, Oldman has to embody Churchill's manner and speech. So what kind of work did you do with him to help him develop that performance and recreate Churchill in that way?
Well, Gary is an actor who likes lots of preparation. So he prepared for about 4 months in his guest house at the back of his house, and would send me recordings of himself delivering the speeches, and we'd talk, and then finally we did 4 weeks of rehearsals with the other cast members prior to shooting to work out exactly who this character was and how he related to other people. And then we started shooting, and the relationship between actor and director is kind of sacrosanct, and you just have to make sure that he's your primary focus.
Now, Churchill, being already such a well-known figure, did you take away any new knowledge or insights about him just from the process of making this film?
His humor, really. I was amazed by how Churchill used humor to negotiate these very, very difficult times, as we all do, but the humor was the thing that or one of the things that most inspired me. It's actually, because the film is surprisingly funny, which people maybe don't expect from the title or from the subject matter, but there's a lightness and a mischief to Churchill that I really enjoy.
Now, in addition to Churchill himself, there are other important historical figures portrayed in the film, like King George VI, played by Ben Mendelsohn, Neville Chamberlain, played by Ronald Pickup. Is it a complicated casting process to try and recreate a number of historical roles in a way that feel equally authentic?
Yeah, very much so. But what you have to do is also then just create a world in which these characters can feel true and alive. An environment in a way that they feel true and alive, and so the rehearsal process is really important part of that, so that everyone gets into a kind of understanding of what each other are doing, and you just piece by piece you put the thing together.
Now, in a historical drama like this, period details are also important, from the production design to the costumes. How much work and preparation went into creating the look of the film?
An enormous amount. My designer and I worked to try and create a kind of grubbiness to the world. London at the time still had a lot of coal burning factories, and there was a lot of smog in the air, and it blackened all the buildings. And so there's not a lot of visual effects work in the movie, but one of the main tasks of the post department was to kind of blacken all the buildings and give London that sense of grime and dirt.
Yeah, and a lot of that visual impact of the film, I think, comes from the cinematography by Bruno Delbonnel. I believe this is your first time working with him. So how did you work together on the visual style of the photography of the film?
Well, Bruno's an extraordinary man and a great DP, and a very lovely man as well. So it was a pleasure to sit with him for I think about 3 weeks prior to shooting, and we just went through every scene and talked about the intention of the scene and how best to realize that cinematically. One of the problems we faced was the fact that the film is set in May 1940, which is one of the hottest on record at the time, and yet we were shooting in December and January. So we had to find a way of giving the atmosphere of sticky heat without actually going outdoors. So we developed this lighting technique, which was kind of allow these deep dark shadows, and then these very hard spots of light coming through the windows to create this kind of claustrophobic heat.
And among other artists working behind the scenes who you've actually worked with in the past is Dario Marianelli, who composed the score. How's it working with him from film to film to create the particular style of music that each film needs?
You know, Dario and I, as you say, have worked together for a long time, and so we have this kind of understanding now. The music is integral to the movie. I wanted the movie to play as a kind of political thriller, and so it needed this kind of ticking clock tempo to it. And I've been listening to a lot of kind of modernist composers recently as well, minimalist modernist composers, and so I wanted something that was a little less in the kind of romantic vein that Dario is so used to. So I feel like the score is quite a departure for him. During those makeup tests with Kazoo, one of the things that Gary and I first developed was this kind of tempo of his walk, this kind of vibrant tempo. And so we took some film and photographs of him in costume and makeup walking, and then I sent that to Dario and told him that this was the tempo that I wanted the music to work at. And then so this is prior to shooting, just when we have a script. And then Dario starts writing the score based on the script and based on those photographs, which then I use on set to, again, help Gary remember the kind of tempos that we were talking about, which we then take into the cutting room and use the and use that music in the cutting room. So at no point are we having to use temps. It's always kind of, I try and develop the film as a kind of whole rather than kind of piece by piece.
Now, some of the most impactful scenes in the film, are these dramatic scenes and speeches in Parliament. Big group scenes in that setting. What's it like orchestrating that many actors and extras on that kind of scene?
I really enjoy that stuff. I really love working with large groups of supporting artists. I enjoy the process of giving them the film and saying, this, you can take ownership of this. You are all actors for today, and helping them to really engage with the material. I remember a wonderful morning when Gary was about to deliver the Fight Them on the Beaches speech, and for whatever reason, he was running a little bit late, and so I started playing music over the sound system and ended up playing the Beatles' Hey Jude. And I had 600 men singing along with their arms in the air to Hey Jude. And then when Gary walked onto the set, there was this enormous round of applause and cheering and so on. And so Gary feels supported by those 600 men, and they feel like they're engaged in the making of this movie rather than just being herded around like sheep. They're being told exactly what their characters might be thinking and feeling and how they might be behaving, rather than just given kind of physical actions. And so they support Gary. Gary feels that support from them and gives, a performance in that context. And also they feel like they're engaged and they give a performance as well. And I really enjoyed that whole process.
Now, as kind of a counterpoint to those Parliament scenes, there's another intimate kind of group scene where Winston Churchill finds himself on the train with just regular citizens. When we get such a different view of Churchill from that scene, what was it like shooting that one?
It was a very interesting scene. There was a lot of pressure on that scene. I felt a lot of pressure on that scene because it was, for me, the pivotal moment of the film. It's what we'd been building up to. And also it was the scene that first made me cry when I read the screenplay. And so I was trying to relive that experience. I think it's really important to always remember your initial response to a screenplay. because it's probably the closest that that you'll have to what the audience experience. So it was trying to also give respect to each and every one of those members of the British public on that underground train, trying to make sure that Britain was represented there, not just kind of the English British, but also the Irish, and also from what were then the colonies, making sure that there was a diverse group, and then trying to realize the character within each character so that they felt entirely three-dimensional.
Now, as the film starts to open and people start to see this film, what do you hope? How do you hope this story will resonate with contemporary audiences that are maybe seeing the story for the first time, or maybe have seen something about Churchill in the past, but are seeing this version certainly for the first time?
I don't know. I think I think the storyteller's job is to present scenarios and ask questions, and allow and respect the audience enough to then take those questions and find the answers themselves. It's a movie about the power of language and the importance of language in our democratic system, and it's a movie about the power of words and also the importance of doubt in the process of attaining wisdom. Without the doubt, without the self-examination that Churchill goes through, his policies would be superficial. And so I hope that the audience will take all of that from the movie and take that out into the streets. I have a great love of humanity, and so also I hope that maybe the public will share that love.
Well, I want to congratulate you on this film again, and best of luck as people start to see it and get to experience the film, and of course this performance by Gary Oldman at the center of it. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you very much.